It shouldn't come as any great surprise that there is a crisis in the Garda Síochána at the moment, and by extension in the Department of Justice in relation to the state of policing in the country. Because there has been a series of red flags that certainly have been present in varying degrees since about 2014, when supposedly a reform project started in relation to the Garda Síochána, but particularly obvious since 2019, when the Commissioner introduced his policing model, which has been one of the single biggest disruptive factors to the continuance of uniform policing that the state has ever encountered. And that has been simmering away in the background. And obviously, the industrial relations issues that have arisen are part of that, but also have their own dynamic. But suffice to say that problems are nothing new in the policing world internationally. Police Scotland at the moment, the London Metropolitan Police, and the PSNI. So it is very usual to have problems in policing. And of course, in society generally here, when we talk about health and housing and drugs and banking, problems are part of dealing with the normal up and downs of any society. And I guess the only thing that we can be judged on is our ability to deal with the problems, to recognize the red flags, and to preempt the situation before the tipping point arrives. And of course, the tipping points arose in Dublin recently with the assault on the tourists. But I think the important point is that those pre existing conditions were in place for quite a considerable time, and had not been addressed. Would make one other remark is that in the reform process that has been so called since 2014, there's been a singular lack of domestic policing expertise invited into that process. Strangely, and it doesn't give me any pleasure to say it, there's been almost an ABG. Anyone but Garda has a view on how policing should be run in the country. And I think that has been a big mistake, and it does impact into other areas like morale, etc.
Personally, I think I was very fortunate. In my earlier policing career, I enjoyed very much the frontline policing, the interaction, and a little bit of the excitement and the adrenaline. But always it's very useful, particularly if one is in frontline policing, is to have the opportunity to step back from the fray and see exactly what is going on and what's the purpose of it. Are we just simply repeating the same experience time over time over time? I had such an opportunity in the late 90s when I studied at the University of Leicester, and I was asked to do a paper on the study of policing strategy in the city of Dublin. And the area there that I looked at then was the divisions of Dublin North Central and Dublin South Central, and got some extraordinarily revealing feedback from colleagues there, and it was well supported in both of those divisions. And I was particularly interested in trying to see exactly what our attitudes were within the Garda Síochána ourselves, and also what our relationship was like with the public generally, with the community, and with the media. Now, that paper is available at www.jaobrien.ie, and if you have the time, it might be useful just to have to read it, and I would appreciate your comments on that as well. However, together with colleagues in 2000, the following year, we hosted a conference in Dublin called the Challenge of Change, and we invited speakers to it, which included the director of the EU Police Agency called Europol, and that was Jürgen Storbeck, and Commissioner John F. Timoney, who was then the head of the Philadelphia Police, and indeed a Dubliner by birth himself. And the conference was directed towards people involved or interested in criminal justice, community affairs, and commerce. It covered topics such as diversity, privatisation, and change management. The speakers also included some very prominent figures in policing in Britain, Mr. John Grieve, who was then director of the UK's Racial and Violent Crime Task Force, and who had a very credible career as an anti-terrorist officer with the Metropolitan Police. Ms. Diana Yack was also there, an international consultant at that time on equality and human rights issues. And we were also addressed at the conference by Mike Rowe, Dr. Mike Rowe, lecturer in politics at the Scarman Centre in the University of Leicester. And each of those speakers attended, and we had the benefit of their experience and the different policing environments that they represented, both the academic and the operational. And it was extremely interesting and enlightening. And that was part of our general view with these colleagues, that we should have a broader approach to what we did. We, all of us, probably without exception, enjoyed our policing role. Sometimes, dare I say it, we even loved it. But the idea was to just simply take a broader view and step back from the trenches for a while and see what lessons were to be learned.
The research I did was done according to the appropriate academic standards, but I was struck by one of the responses, the free text responses from a young guard who remarked in 1998 at the start of our project. He said, public order crime is a huge problem in the city of Dublin. There are a lot of public order offences taking place, and there is a certain tolerance towards it. Because Ireland has a very strong drinking culture, it is almost accepted that you can have a few drinks and then you can basically do what you want and use the excuse of being drunk as a defence afterwards. It is physically impossible as a Garda to deal with all public order offences, but I think there should be a much higher emphasis placed on it. Tourists are continually pointing out that various public order offences would not be tolerated in their country. I think that's a remarkable comment, and we're 24 years or 23 years further on from the point that young Garda, who had 5 years service at the time, made that very appropriate comment, a very revealing comment, and he was operating on the front line in Dublin City on those occasions. If we accept the idea that there is a failure, or has been a failure, to recognise red flags and tipping points, we'll also have to concede that even the most vociferous of critics would have to concede that the business of leading and managing the Garda Síochána is an enormous task and strongly influenced by daily events. Those events are often highly charged, politically sensitive, and attract serious media interest. There is pressure to disregard the strategic approach and to lead instinctively and transactionally. Now, that may make it difficult for ordinary officers, and indeed senior officers as well, to speak truth to power. And maybe the safe response is also just to find out what the boss wants and to deliver it uncritically to the leader. Now, that's a very serious situation, and it pertains directly to the policing model that's in operation currently and the failure to recognise the red flags inherent in the current situation, and which have led to the issues we've discussed earlier. Crisis is a normal part of policing in every environment. It's in the nature of policing to confront crisis. Obviously, it is the way in which the policing services deal with the crisis is the key question, and to what degree preemptive plans and the strategic approach has recognised the inevitability of challenges and of enormous challenges. In that regard, I think many red flags have been consistently missed since 2014 in the Garda Síochána, and indeed in particular since 2019 because of the introduction of that totally dysfunctional policing model. In terms of the here and now, the immediate reaction, of course, by politically and publicly has been to wonder what can happen to change the situation in Dublin city centre. It would be a mistake to consider that the policing issues only arise in Dublin. But in relation to Dublin, yes, the short-term injection of overtime money will help in the short term. It will do little to deal with the problems of retention and recruitment, which are both seriously affecting the ability of the guards to maintain a high uniform presence. But clearly, one of the most useful things of taking a distraction from the current Garda administration would be to abandon that crazy policing model idea and free people up to get back into contact with the community in a much more holistic way and much more locally based. There are serious issues ahead, but there are marvellous challenges as well to be overcome. And of course, the internal
issues in relation to IR are important. Very little progress can be made ultimately unless there is a constituency of support, or at least a meaningful constituency of support from the Gardaí themselves to the direction in which the organisation is moving. But a consensus way forward and a realistic way forward is certainly in the interests of everybody and every citizen. And in that regard, there has to be an awareness of what a red flag looks like, and there has to be an awareness that if they are disregarded, then of course the crisis will come thick and fast as the future unfolds.